It's Thunderground Thursday on Professor Sky's Record Review, the always positive new music review show where I'm going to be talking about Mythopoetics, the new album by Half Waif. Now, for those of you who know me, you know that I love language and I love words, and waif is a very interesting word. I almost reviewed her album from last year, but it just I didn't have a proper angle on it. But I really want to take a second to think about the nature of the term waif. Now, when we hear it today, we only think of it, at least I only think of it, in terms of a waif look. A usually woman who is very thin or frail, popularized by such models as Twiggy and Kate Moss, etc. It turns out, though, that the origin of the term goes back to like 19th century terms for the destitute, like for homeless people, for people who are down on their luck. So I think the name half waif, beyond having a very satisfyingly difficult feel in your mouth, half waif, half waif. It's a hard words, hard words to put together. I like this idea of being sort of half down on your luck, and then also half of waif in the other sense, in the physical sense. I remember very fondly having a conversation with a friend of mine in college, and she was an actress and she was fairly tall, and she discussed how she will never be an ingenue because she can never be a waif. And these sort of big words. And I was thinking about the oppression of the waif ideal, of the sort of implied frailty that is desired in women. And so that's just kind of the initial take that I have. And then I kind of wanted to talk more about my resistance to reviewing this album. I've talked a lot on this channel about part of what I'm trying to do is get over my biases, the things that made me not like and not listen to other music. And probably the biggest and most significant one is I have had a fairly misogynistic ear. I don't really know what else to say or how else to describe it, but I have tended in the past to immediately dismiss, on some level, music made by women. Now, this isn't all women, all musicians. I grew up liking Laurie Anderson and PJ Harvey, one of whom we'll come back to very soon. But in general, someone like Joni Mitchell, I never quite got into. And looking back now in my adulthood, I realized I was just a fool. I mean, what did I tell myself I didn't like? Oh, I just don't like these vocal acrobatics, Like, I don't want to hear someone go, yeah, but hey, Sky, who was your favorite musician for most of your 20s? Harry Nilsson. What does he do if not vocal acrobatics, right? Or I didn't like overly confessional lyrics. That's a lie as well. I love overly confessional lyrics. I spend most of my time on this channel talking about how much I love the strength that comes from vulnerability. These are all things that are found in music made by women more often than music made by men, and this bias I've had against it, I've just needed to push through. Of course, the best way to push through a bias is through exposure. So this album is a great way for me to push through and hopefully you push through this bias that I have. Now, I'm spending so much time talking about this bias and about gender for a reason. And that goes to the title of the album, Mythopoetics. Now, you might be under the mistaken belief that this is just a cool sounding word. Mythopoetics. It's like a myth and it's poetic. But it's not. It's a very specific, very gendered movement. When I say the word men's movement, you probably first think of men's rights. As well you should. Men's rights activists are some of the worst human beings on planet Earth, who are very intent on not only maintaining dominance of men over women, but actually strengthening it and furthering it. But that's not what Mythopoetics is about. Before the men's rights movement, there was a sort of men's movement about finding your inner masculinity. It was not always completely dangerous, completely toxic, or anti-feminist. This is at the end of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s, and this was a time where a lot of men were feeling through modern life, they were distanced from their primal sense of masculinity. Okay. If you haven't watched the video Social Construct by Philosophy Tube, I suggest you watch it. I guess I'll put a link to it up there. It's It's a great video. It talks all about these kinds of issues. But still, whatever it is to be a man, the Mythopoetics movement was trying to return to those masculine values. This is often parodied by talking about people like going into the woods and beating on drums and screaming. Often it's somewhat culturally insensitive because it goes back to like the idea that Native Americans knew how to be men because they were in touch with nature and they banged on drums and they screamed in the forest. Okay, that kind of weird exoticism, which is another word for racism. And actually, now that I think about it, I had a camp counselor when I went to camp in Wyoming when I was a kid, where I was in very close proximity to a serial child molester, and I was lucky. I got away from that. But I didn't get away from my camp counselor who insisted on this kind of mythopoetics. It was a boys-only camp, and he insisted that we learn how to go into the woods and have Native American rituals and bang on drums. And I remember feeling, like looking at this guy, and just feeling how pathetic he was. Just how sad and how much he was striving to be something he wasn't. So what do we do with all this? This Half Waif who's naming an album Mythopoetics. How does it all fit together? I'm not sure I have an answer for you, but I can tell you that in considering it, it makes the whole album a lot more interesting to listen to because you're trying to figure out like, how does this tie in? Is this about trying to be like Mythopoetics? The album is very confessional. It is very raw. The album cover features her sort of standing in the woods or like in a field, kind of screaming. Is this some kind of primal scream thing? Is that what this is? I don't know, but I'm going to take you through the whole album and try to figure it out. Stylistically, the album is pretty hard to define. One thing that I like about Bandcamp is artists can make up their own genres. So along with electro, indie pop, experimental, there's mood ring pop. Mood ring pop. Half Waif is really into garbledygook pseudoscience of the 1970s. If you don't know, a mood ring was a thing that was sold in the 70s, and I guess is still sold, in which you can tell someone's mood by the color of their ring. So I don't quite know what that means, except that it is very moody music. It does put you in a certain state. It does deal a lot with emotions while still being quite poppy. The whole thing feels very COVID. I don't know if she wrote and recorded every single note on here. I think maybe there's one other collaborator, but it feels very intimate. Nice mixture of acoustic and electric noises. Not very interested in common song structures, We're not dealing with verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? Very rarely repeating choruses. It's really her voice that just dominates over everything, that sweeps over everything and just controls the rhythm of every song, the flow of every song, the emotion of every song. One thing that's interesting is that even though it has this intimate feel, this confessional feel, it never quite feels like bedroom pop. And I don't really know how they did this. Like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a certain grandness to it, a certain kind of sweeping feel. I guess you could call it cinematic. Maybe it just has sort of an outward feel to it. Lyrically, they're great. It's a great album where basically every song has one or two ideas or two lyrics that make you go, wow, what a great idea. What a great way to put this. She doesn't seem tortured. She seems like sort of tortured. Sortured? No. Sort of tortured. Minorly distressed. And she seems to be singing about that. I'll give you an example. So for every album that I review, this is especially important on Thunderground Thursdays, where I try to review artists that maybe you haven't heard of or don't know very well. I give an example song, one song for you to listen to. You go out, you listen to the song, you come back, and then you hear me talk about it. The song I'm going to choose as the example song off this album, I don't think it's one of the singles, but it's called Midnight Asks. I'll put a link to it up there or there. I always forget which side YouTube puts it on. It's up there. This is not a good album to do the hokey pokey to. This song is a great example of the dynamics, the sensitivity. The great instrumentation on here, so many different layers, so many different sounds happening, great movement. It's kind of an upbeat song with this kind of powerful 80s sounding drum beat. Sounds are just everywhere, and they're very well layered, and it's never too busy. The lyrics are mostly about who is she. Midnight asks me to be what I am not, have I already forgotten? There is a part of this album which appears as though, like you remember in Zoolander, where Zoolander looks down in the puddle and says, "Who am I?" And then the reflection answers, "I don't know." There is a part of it that feels like, I think she lives in New York, that part of this album is just her looking at her reflection in the puddle and saying, "Who am I?" But then the response is this album. Like this midnight, this sort of personification of being out, personification maybe of a freer lifestyle. I'm not quite sure. These vocals are everywhere. The melody is everywhere. I was listening to it while I was eating my sandwich for lunch, and my daughter is walking behind, and she goes, "Is this not in English?" And it makes sense that she says this because of just the way these words cascade and the sounds, like just the sounds of her voice really do transcend the words, I would say. The chorus is great. It has these vocoder sounds, which remind me very strongly of the previously mentioned Laurie Anderson, just kind of playing these voice and effects. How many times have I wondered, how many drives have I made in the dark, how many times eyes on the side of the road, I don't want to die tonight. Beautiful, interesting lyrics here, because if you've ever driven a lot at night, you do sometimes see eyes on the side of the road. Sometimes you see real eyes. Sometimes you imagine eyes if you're tired, right? One time I was driving to I was driving to Canada with my friend Brad, and I was really tired, and I looked and I saw a little tiny, glowing buffalo on the side of the road, like that big. And I swerved out of the way. I'm pretty sure it wasn't actually there, right? But this kind of idea of seeing the eyes on the side of the road and then I don't want to die tonight. It's one of these notes of hope. This album is very hopeful. It's the hope of somebody who's overcoming a minor struggle. Basically, every song feels that way. I like the cricket sounds in the back here. The post-chorus is sweet and catchy with these kind of woo-woo sounds that go through the rest of the song. And if you listen carefully, you can hear a little guitar as well. Electric instruments, acoustic instruments, and electronic all together here. The second chorus is a little bit grander and a little bit nicer. In the whole, it's just this great song which takes you on this journey where you sort of understand what it's saying, but you don't quite get everything. The first page of notes out of the way. Now the whole album opens up with a song called Fabric. And it's a very well-constructed album, okay? So the song I just described, Midnight Asks, is towards the middle, but it opens and ends very similar way. The first song is called Fabric and opens with a piano and a slightly doubled voice. Really nice chorus where you like this, nice low dark piano chords. And the opening lyrics are a good example of the kind of lyrics that she's able to write. Have I forgotten how to be alone? I blame you. Just simple, funny, ironic. Obviously, she doesn't blame this person, but she does at the same time. This leads nicely into Swimmer, which is much more electronic feeling. All the way throughout the album, there's this dynamic between the piano and the electronic. Some arpeggiated chords here. Drum machine kind of pops in. Funny, she rhymes the word felt with felt, but she does it well. The way your arm felt under the soft felt. It takes a good songwriter to be able to rhyme the same word twice. If you can get that to work, it's pretty impressive, and she does here. Greatly layered, very catchy chorus. Again, reminding me a little bit of Laurie Anderson with these ha, ha, ha in the back. Inspiring too, like the way that she sings in this chorus, I wanted to sing for you, so I'm going to sing for you. Again, this idea of just repeating words, even though it's not poetically appropriate. She says at the end of this song, they can't take this away from me, which leads perfectly into the next song, Take Away the Ache, which has this great descending vocal line, gorgeous singing over bleeps and bloops. Take away the ache. I lie awake in the morning before the thoughts start forming, getting in my own way. Are your eyes yet open while you're facing the other way? So a lot of this album, I think, is made for the COVID the COVID afflicted, not those afflicted with COVID, but those afflicted with the effects of COVID, the inability to get out of bed, the sort of sad feeling of being stuck, not being able to get out. That is how we feel here, right? That she wants to get out before her thoughts start getting in her own way. And this line about "Are your eyes yet open while you're facing the other way" is beautiful, because it's also about this inability to reach somebody, right? So if someone's looking away, you don't know if their eyes are open and they're ready to go, right? It's a weird, small detail of life that she's really getting into. Like, you don't know if my eyes are open right now or not. Builds nicely in the chorus. These two lines are sung. The way the chorus is sung is exactly what I have to get over. Like the bombastic vocal acrobatics of this are the thing I have to get used to in order to appreciate the rest of the album. Fortunately, it's not too hard. Fortress is this nice mournful sweeping organ sounds, some pulsing rhythms underneath, very acrobatic and engaging singing with a great line, another great line. "My guess is this is all for you," or "I guess this is all for you." Part of the difficulty of writing poetry for and about people is that it's never really about them or for them. It's always for yourself. And I think she's able to underline that fact. The Apartment is the next song. These nice floating keyboard sounds, very confessional, young person lyrics. "Now I've taken up cigarettes. I hate what it's made me up, like a target outside my apartment, like I'm performing my need." As somebody who did smoke for a few years, I like the tortured nature that she has in here about being a smoker. When I released my first solo album, which I made 10 copies of it and gave it to my friends and family. A lot of it was about my guilt at becoming a smoker, which is the reason why my family didn't like it. And I think we kind of feel this feeling here where she's having trouble, but she's not about to kill herself, and she's not about to do something terrible or super drastic, but she's just doing these things like she is performing her need. Like while she's smoking, she's becoming a target and she is performing her need. It's a great line. It's a really, really great lyric. Then we get to the song Sourdough. It really emphasizes the lack of a simple structure. It's like a verse and then a second part, and then that's it, and just wanders around, gentle piano, well textured. "I'm running from you, from you, from you." Each time that the from you goes, it goes a little bit lower with the voice, and it's very beautiful. It's maybe the best singing on the album. I'd really have a chance to listen to that. The lyrics are about the sacrifices you'd make for loved ones. Like, I would stare at the sun to help the one I love. And I would say, do you know what I would do for the people I love? If it would help them, I would eat sourdough bread. I hate sourdough. I hate it. It's tricksy, terrible bread. You think it's going to be normal bread, but it's tricksy, bad bread. Put in the comments if you agree with me that you hate sourdough bread. As I once said to my wife, I know how they make sourdough bread. They take perfectly good bread and they put sour in it. Next song is called Party's Over. More kind of Laurie Anderson vocalizing in the back. It's about going to a party. Again, I sort of associate this album with a lot of the ways I felt when I was 20 years younger, when I was in my early 20s, and I was kind of like going to parties and feeling like it's over, and like, am I too old to be doing this? And like walking home. Just sort of being tired of being young, right? That's the sense I get from this. The lyrics here, the way she's singing actually provides most of the percussion, which is nice. Horse Racing is kind of a futuristic song, synthesizers, and it's interesting because she's singing about like horse bodies and comparing them to human bodies and being on a horse track. Very 80s style chorus. It's sort of maybe the most typical of a 21st century female-led industrial pop song, you know, like, I don't know, like in the Licky Lee mode or something, right? Where this kind of has that sort of like, my least favorite song on the album, but still a good one. Orange Blossoms, nice arpeggiated chords, again, so a little more automated sounding here. Great lyrics. Somebody buy me roses, make sure I get out of bed today. A song about depression, about how to deal with life, feelings of self-pity, how she's not able to do things, and the false hope that someone else would be able to help her do it. Right? Have you ever felt that you would be happy if somebody would just take care of you? If you have ever had that feeling, have a listen to Orange Blossoms. It'll remind you how wrong you are. Then Midnight Asks, which I've already covered, and then Sodium and Cigarettes. Just great I mean, these are my two favorite vices I've ever enjoyed. I eat a lot of salt, and I used to smoke cigarettes. And she talks about, do I deserve what's coming to me, right? This feeling that impending cancer, you know, 'cause that's part of smoking, is you're literally forcing yourself to acknowledge that you are giving yourself a painful way to die, right? You're like, so I'm gonna be like on a respirator, and I won't be able to breathe or walk anywhere, and I'm doing this on purpose? Cool, yeah, I just, that's cool, that's what I'm doing, right? Like that feeling, do I deserve what's coming to me? What's nice though, she also says, I'll give it another day. There's always this sort of upbeat part here. Maybe that's why it doesn't feel too much like bedroom pop. Maybe that's why it feels a little more intimate, a little bit less intimate, because she's not just giving in to self-despair. She's always offering a little bit of hope. Beautiful, speaking of hope, there's this beautiful section in here, probably my favorite instrumentation on the album, where these synthesizer lines just keep ascending and resolving, and then mixes in with some more vocoder again. It's a beautiful sounding song. Put this song on in your headphones, just tune out for a couple minutes. It's really worth it. The album ends, as I said, with a very similar track to the first one. Starts with Fabric, ends with Powder, basically just a poem put to some gentle piano. And what's interesting here is I think it's the only time on the album where she actually plays the melody that she sings, and you realize how impossibly high she goes and how much range she has. Vocally, she is doing these things where you just have a hard time believing that she's doing so much without ever feeling like she's doing too much, which is really quite a feat. At the end of the song, a little bit of horns jump in. The restraint there, because the horns go so well with her voice. And then we have these beautiful ending lyrics. I'm standing far back from where we watched when I was younger. The living room is black. The house is gone. A vacant lot, a little scar. Some of these similar thematics that we've been seeing in many, many, many other albums this year, of people being back in their childhood homes and feeling the loss and alienation that comes with being an early, a young adult. Just kind of add that to the long list of songs of that thematic. So there's my review. I hope you find it interesting. I definitely suggest giving it a shot. I'm still working through, why is it called Mythopoetics? Is it purely ironic? Is she trying to do that? Is she trying to work out of those things? I don't know. If you have ideas, I gotta remember to do this all the time. If you have ideas, then you tell me in the comments. After you like and smash the like bucket. That's what my daughter once said. She misspoke and said smash the like bucket, and I think that's funny. And subscribe, and also, because I'm not going to be doing, I've been on vacation a lot this summer because I'm a teacher, goddammit. These are my Patreons, so I'm just going to put them on every video for now. Patreon.com/Professor Sky. They help me buy new music, and there they are. So thank you for helping me buy new music. Because if you have dispensable income, instead of buying 2 packs of cigarettes, you could buy an album on vinyl. It's better use of your money. Okay, well, until next time, there's the camera.